It was a Tuesday. Tuesdays often seem to hold a certain kind of quiet, a pause in the week's usual rush. I remember the way the sunlight slanted through the window, dust motes dancing in the golden beams. The mail lay on the small hallway table, a mix of bills and advertisements. Then I saw it. A single envelope, cream-colored, with handwriting I hadn't seen in nearly 10 years. My father's handwriting. My heart did a strange little jump, a mix of fear and a fragile, hesitant hope. It felt like a ghost had reached out from a distant, forgotten room. The air in my small apartment suddenly felt thick, heavy with unspoken words and years of silence. I picked up the letter. It was surprisingly light, yet it felt like it weighed a ton. My hands trembled slightly as I turned it over. The postmark was from a small town I barely remembered him mentioning. For a long moment, I just stood there, the letter clutched in my hand. Opening it felt like opening a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. What could he possibly have to say after all this time? The silence had become a familiar, if uncomfortable, companion. I carried the letter to my kitchen table, placing it down as if it were a delicate, ancient artifact. I made a cup of tea, a small ritual to steady my nerves. The simple act of waiting for the water to boil, of steeping the tea bag, gave me a few moments to breathe. Part of me wanted to tear it open immediately. Another part wanted to leave it sealed, to pretend it hadn't arrived, to keep the past safely locked away. But curiosity and a deeper, unacknowledged yearning finally won. With a deep breath, I slid my finger under the flap, the sound of tearing paper echoing loudly in the quiet room. The single sheet of paper inside was filled with that familiar, slightly slanted script. The words were simple, cautious. He wrote that he hoped I was well. He mentioned a small memory, something from my childhood I had almost forgotten. There was no grand apology, no lengthy explanation for his absence, not in that first letter. Just a tentative reaching out, a question mark hanging in the air. It was the beginning of a conversation that would span 2 decades. A conversation carried by the humble, patient medium of pen and paper. A conversation that would slowly, carefully, begin to reshape my life. The estrangement hadn't been a sudden explosion. It was more like a slow drift, a boat untethering from its dock, almost unnoticed until it was too far to call back. My parents divorced when I was young, and while my mother was a constant presence, my father became a figure seen on weekends, then less frequently. Schedules clashed, new lives were built, misunderstandings, small at first, grew like weeds in an untended garden. Eventually, the calls stopped. The visits ceased. A heavy blanket of silence settled between us, a silence that lasted through my teenage years and into my early adulthood. The impact of his absence was a quiet ache, a missing piece in the puzzle of who I was. I often found myself looking for him in other male figures, a teacher, a coach, searching for a nod of approval, a word of guidance. Birthdays and holidays carried a particular sting, a reminder of the empty chair, the unspoken well-wishes. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was fine on my own. But late at night sometimes the questions would surface. Did he ever think of me? Did he wonder what I was doing, who I was becoming? The silence offered no answers, only more questions. I built walls around that part of my heart. It was easier than constantly feeling the void. I focused on my studies, on my friends, on creating a life that felt full, even if a significant part of its foundation felt incomplete. I rarely spoke of him. It was a closed chapter, or so I tried to convince myself. But the truth is, a child never truly stops yearning for a parent's presence, for that unique connection. His absence shaped my interactions, made me cautious in relationships, always half expecting people to leave. It was a subtle undercurrent, influencing choices I didn't even realize were connected to that old hurt. When that first letter arrived, it was like a tremor that threatened those carefully constructed walls. It brought all the buried emotions rushing to the surface, the confusion, the lingering anger, but also that persistent childlike hope. The years of silence had created a chasm. I wondered if a few sheets of paper, sent across miles and years, could ever truly bridge such a vast and lonely distance. The weight of that silence, I realized, had been heavier than I ever acknowledged. It was a burden I had carried without fully understanding its true dimensions until that envelope appeared. The content of my father's early letters was tentative, much like my own replies. He wrote about simple things, the weather in his small town, a book he was reading, a memory of a fishing trip we took when I was very small, a detail so specific it made my breath catch. He didn't try to excuse his absence or rewrite history. Instead, his words were like hesitant footsteps into a room long left dark. He asked about my life, my studies, my dreams, with a gentle curiosity that felt surprisingly genuine. There was a humility in his tone, a quiet acknowledgement of the lost time. His handwriting, once so distant, became a familiar comfort. Each letter was a small piece of him, arriving in my mailbox like a message in a bottle. I would read them several times, searching between the lines for the things left unsaid. His tone was never demanding, never imposing. It was more like an invitation to share, to connect if I was willing. He didn't push for forgiveness or a rapid reconciliation. He seemed to understand that trust, once broken, needed time and care to mend. His patience was a balm to a wound I hadn't realized was still so tender. Slowly, I began to share more of myself in my replies. At first, it was just an outline of my days, but his consistent, gentle responses encouraged me to open up. I wrote about my struggles at university, my anxieties about the future. His letters, in turn, offered not direct solutions, but rather perspectives. He'd share an anecdote from his own life, a lesson learned, a thought that might offer a different way of looking at things. It wasn't advice in the traditional sense, but more like shared wisdom offered softly, without expectation. The influence of these early letters was subtle but profound. They began to chip away at the resentment I had harbored for so long. They showed me a side of my father I hadn't known, or perhaps had forgotten. A thoughtful man, a man capable of introspection, a man who, despite everything, still cared. Each letter was a thread, and slowly, painstakingly, these threads began to weave a new connection between us. A connection built on ink and understanding, on the willingness to reach across the silence. The simple act of writing, of choosing words carefully, became a sacred space for us. There were moments during those 2 decades of correspondence when life felt overwhelming. Times when I stumbled, when the path ahead seemed shrouded in fog. It was during these difficult periods that my father's letters became like guiding stars, small points of light offering direction and solace. I remember one particular time during my final year of university, when the pressure of exams and the uncertainty of what came next felt crushing. I was riddled with self-doubt, convinced I wasn't capable enough, smart enough to achieve my goals. I wrote to him about my fears, pouring out my anxieties onto the page. His reply arrived a week later, a little thicker than usual. He didn't dismiss my feelings or offer platitudes. Instead, he shared a story about his own early struggles, a time when he had faced a significant setback and felt like giving up. He wrote about the importance of perseverance, not as a blind charge forward, but as a quiet resilience, a belief in one's own ability to learn and grow from mistakes. He reminded me that failure wasn't an endpoint, but a detour, a chance to reassess and try again. Another instance that stands out was when I experienced my first real heartbreak. The pain was raw, consuming. I felt foolish, exposed, and deeply alone. In my letter to him, the words were tear-stained, a jumble of hurt and confusion. His response was incredibly gentle. He didn't try to minimize my pain or tell me there were other fish in the sea. He simply acknowledged how much it hurt to lose someone you cared for. He wrote about the courage it takes to open your heart and the inevitable pain that sometimes comes with it, but also about the strength that is forged in healing. His letters were never prescriptive. He rarely told me what to do. Instead, he offered perspective, shared experiences, and asked questions that helped me find my own answers. He had a way of validating my feelings while also encouraging me to look beyond the immediate crisis. It was through these written exchanges, particularly during challenging times, that I began to understand the depth of his wisdom. His words provided a steady anchor, a reminder that storms pass, and that even in the darkest of nights, there are stars to guide you, if you only remember to look up. Section 5. Letters from a Mentor, Shaping a Career Path. As I moved from university into the working world, my father's letters began to take on the quality of mentorship. I was navigating unfamiliar territory, trying to find my place, to build a career that felt meaningful. The corporate ladder, the office politics, the pressure to succeed, it was all new and often daunting. His insights, gleaned from his own varied professional life, became an invaluable resource. He had experienced both successes and failures, and he shared these lessons with an honesty that was both humbling and incredibly helpful. I remember agonizing over a job offer. It was a prestigious position, well paid, but something about it didn't feel right. I wrote to him, outlining my dilemma. His reply didn't tell me whether to take the job or not. Instead, he asked me questions. What were my core values? What truly motivated me beyond money or status? He shared a story about a time he had chosen a high-paying job that made him miserable, and how he eventually found more satisfaction in work that aligned with his passions, even if it was less glamorous. His letter helped me clarify my own priorities. There were also times when I faced challenges at work, a difficult boss, a project that seemed impossible. His letters would offer encouragement, not by minimizing the difficulty, but by reminding me of my strengths. He'd often recall a small achievement from my past, something I'd forgotten, and connect it to the present challenge, showing me I had the resilience to overcome it. He emphasized the importance of integrity, of treating colleagues with respect, and of always striving to do your best, regardless of the immediate reward. These were not just career tips, they were life lessons. His guidance was never about climbing a ladder for the sake of it. It was about finding work that offered purpose, that allowed for growth, and that contributed something positive. He encouraged me to take calculated risks, to not be afraid of changing paths if one wasn't working out. Through his letters, he became an unseen mentor, his wisdom shaping my professional decisions, helping me build not just a career, but a working life that felt authentic and fulfilling. His words were a compass, consistently pointing me towards meaning and integrity in my professional endeavors. Section 6. Shaping a Life, One Letter at a Time, Growth Through His Words. The consistent exchange of letters over 20 years did more than just mend a broken relationship or offer guidance in specific situations. It profoundly shaped my personal growth, influencing my worldview and my understanding of myself. Each letter from my father was a small lesson in empathy, in patience, in the power of words to heal and connect. His willingness to be vulnerable, to share his own imperfections and lessons learned, gave me the courage to examine my own life with greater honesty and compassion. Before our correspondence began, my world often felt black and white. People were either good or bad, situations either right or wrong. His letters, filled with nuanced reflections on life's complexities, helped me see the shades of gray. He wrote about forgiveness, not as a forgetting of wrongs, but as a letting go of the bitterness that harms the forgiver most. He shared his thoughts on resilience, showing me that strength wasn't about never falling, but about getting up each time, perhaps a little wiser, a little more compassionate towards oneself and others. His words encouraged me to be more introspective. He would often pose gentle questions in his letters, questions that prompted me to think deeply about my beliefs, my motivations, and my relationships with others. He celebrated my small victories and offered comfort in my disappointments, always with a perspective that looked towards growth. This steady, thoughtful dialogue helped me develop a stronger sense of self, one that was less reactive to external pressures and more anchored in my own values that were, in part, illuminated by his insights. The simple act of writing, of articulating my thoughts and feelings on paper, was itself a powerful tool for growth. And receiving his thoughtful replies, knowing that someone was truly listening and considering my words, fostered a sense of being seen and understood that I hadn't experienced before in that particular way. His letters helped me cultivate patience as I waited for his replies and taught me the importance of choosing words carefully, understanding their impact. Over 2 decades, this quiet, consistent exchange shaped me into a more reflective, empathetic, and resilient individual. Section 7. Memories Woven in Script Childhood Whispers Return. One of the most unexpected gifts of our correspondence was the gentle unearthing of childhood memories. In his letters, my father would often recall small moments from my early years, details I had long forgotten, or perhaps never fully registered at the time. He remembered the way I used to mispronounce certain words, my favorite bedtime story, a particular drawing I had made for him. These weren't grand, dramatic memories, but tiny, precious fragments of a shared past, now brought back to life through his careful, loving script. These rediscovered memories were like finding lost photographs. They added color and texture to my understanding of my own history and of him. He wrote about a day at the beach where I, as a very small child, was determined to fill a tiny bucket with the entire ocean, a task I pursued with solemn focus. He described my triumphant, sandy smile when I presented him with my full bucket. Reading these anecdotes, I could almost feel the sun on my skin, smell the salt in the air. It was a gentle way of rebuilding a bridge to a time that had felt distant and somewhat hazy. These shared recollections weren't just nostalgic, they were transformative. They helped me see him not just as the distant father of my teenage years, but as the younger man who had once been a central part of my small world. They softened some of the hard edges of my own memories, allowing me to see the past with more compassion. It was as if he was gently handing back pieces of my childhood, carefully preserved in his mind, and now offered to me through his letters. Each memory was a small affirmation of connection, a whisper that said, "I remember. You were important." Sometimes his memories would spark my own. A phrase he used or a place he mentioned would unlock a dusty room in my mind, revealing a forgotten scene. We began to piece together a mosaic of the past, not to dwell on what was lost, but to understand the foundations of who we were. It was a quiet healing process. The letters became a space where the joys and even the simple ordinariness of a shared past could be acknowledged and cherished, weaving a richer, more complete tapestry of our family story. Section 8. The depth of a reclaimed bond more than just advice. Over the span of 2 decades, our letters transformed from tentative inquiries into a deep, meaningful dialogue. The connection we forged was built not on grand gestures, but on the steady accumulation of shared thoughts, vulnerabilities, and mutual respect. It went far beyond simple advice-giving. It became a profound exchange of lives, a testament to the enduring nature of a parent-child bond, even one that had been stretched and strained by years of silence. His letters were a consistent presence, a quiet reassurance that I was not alone in navigating life's journey. The advice he offered was always rooted in a deep understanding of human nature, and increasingly, an understanding of me. He learned about my strengths and my insecurities, my dreams and my fears, not through daily interaction, but through the careful, considered words we exchanged. He never judged my mistakes. Instead, he helped me see them as opportunities for learning. He celebrated my successes, not with effusive praise, but with a quiet pride that felt incredibly genuine and affirming. His wisdom was not of the textbook variety. It was lived wisdom, earned through his own experiences. I found myself looking forward to his letters with an eagerness that surprised me. They were a source of comfort, a place of quiet reflection. In a world that was becoming increasingly fast-paced and digitally connected, our slow, deliberate correspondence felt like an anchor. There was an intimacy in the handwritten words, a sense of his presence in the very strokes of his pen. We discussed books, current events, philosophy, and the simple joys and sorrows of everyday life. He became not just a father, but a confidant, a mentor, and a friend. The depth of this reclaimed bond was something I could never have imagined when that first letter arrived. It taught me that it's never too late to rebuild, to forgive, to understand. It showed me that love can find a way, even through years of distance and misunderstanding, if both hearts are willing. The letters were the bridge, but the foundation of that bridge was a resilient, underlying connection, a desire from both of us to find our way back to each other, one carefully chosen word at a time. Section 9. A legacy in letters, his voice, my guide. Now, years after our correspondence began, and even after he is no longer here to write them, those letters remain. They are stacked neatly in a wooden box, a tangible record of a relationship rebuilt, a testament to a father's enduring love. They are more than just paper and ink. They are his voice, captured for all time. When I face a new challenge, or when I simply miss him, I can open that box and pull out a letter. His words, his wisdom, his gentle guidance are still there, ready to offer comfort and perspective. This collection of letters is his true legacy to me. It's not about material possessions, but about the invaluable gift of his thoughts, his experiences, and his unwavering support. He taught me, through his patient writing, the importance of connection, the power of forgiveness, and the quiet strength found in perseverance. He showed me how to navigate life with integrity and compassion, not by preaching, but by sharing his own journey, his own struggles, and his own moments of clarity. These lessons are woven into the fabric of who I am today. The world feels a little quieter without the anticipation of his next letter, but his presence endures. I find myself thinking, what would Dad have said about this? And often I can almost hear his voice, thoughtful and calm, offering a perspective I might have missed. The letters have become an internal compass, guiding my choices, reminding me of the values he held dear. His wisdom didn't depart with him. It lives on, accessible whenever I need it, thanks to the simple, profound act of writing. The journey we took, from estrangement to deep connection, all through the humble medium of letters, taught me that the most important conversations don't always need to be spoken aloud. Sometimes, the most profound connections are built slowly, thoughtfully, one word at a time, across miles and years. His letters are a reminder that love, understanding, and guidance can be a quiet, enduring presence, a father's voice continuing to shape a life long after he has gone. This, I believe, is the most beautiful kind of inheritance,